Have you ever left your kitchen door open on just a really nice breezy afternoon and suddenly a bird flies in?
Oh, yeah. It is chaos.
Complete chaos. It happens so fast. Like 1 second you're just making coffee and the next there is this sparrow frantically doing laps around your ceiling fixtures.
Right.
And the moment it gets inside, pure survival instinct just, completely takes over. It spots the biggest, brightest source of light in the room, which is usually the closed glass window.
Of course.
And it thinks, well, that's it. That's the way out. So it flies straight toward it. Bam! It hits the glass, falls to the countertop, completely dazed.
Awful to watch.
It really is. But it's determined, right? It gathers itself up, ruffles its feathers, and tries again. Only this time, it flies even harder with more urgency, totally convinced that, velocity is the missing ingredient.
Right. If I just go faster, I'll break through.
Exactly. Bam! Down it goes again. And it will just repeat this, literally smashing its own beak against an invisible barrier, exhausting its entire life force, and completely ignoring the open door just, 3 feet to its left.
It is a profound, albeit pretty heartbreaking, display of misdirected energy.
Yeah.
You're basically witnessing an organism expending its absolute maximum effort, utilizing all of its evolutionary gifts, its speed, its agility, its determination, but doing so with zero clarity about the actual environment it's in.
Right.
The strategy is fundamentally flawed, but the bird's only response to failure is to just, increase the intensity of that flawed strategy.
And I bring this image up right at the start because if we are being completely honest, how often do we operate exactly like that bird?
Oh, constantly.
Right, think about your career trajectory, or maybe a really complex dynamic with a family member, or even just your attempts to build a healthier habit. You find a strategy, it doesn't work, so you push yourself harder.
You double down.
You double down. You work longer hours, you argue your point more aggressively, you restrict your diet more severely, and you're crashing into the same invisible glass, getting absolutely nowhere, and you just end up sitting on the metaphorical kitchen floor of your life, completely depleted.
Yeah, and we are, entirely conditioned by this modern hustle culture to believe that the answer to any friction is just more force.
Yes.
If you aren't succeeding, you just aren't grinding hard enough.
Which is such a toxic mindset.
It really is. That paradigm of sheer, unyielding force is breaking people. It leads to burnout, chronic illness, and this really deep sense of existential hollowness, which is precisely why today's source material is so vital.
Yeah.
It offers a framework that fundamentally rejects the idea that more effort automatically equals better results.
So today, our mission in this deep dive is to sort of shortcut your path to being genuinely well-informed on this alternative framework. We are unpacking the book Wise Effort: How to Focus Your Genius Energy on What Matters Most by Diana Hill.
It's a fantastic book.
It really is. And the promise of this material, just so we're clear, isn't about teaching you, a new productivity hack or how to squeeze one more hour of output from your day.
Please, no more productivity hacks.
Right, we have enough of those. This is about learning to channel your innate energy intelligently using 3 core tasks: get curious, open up, and focus your energy.
And what makes this approach particularly compelling, I think, is its consilience. The author doesn't just rely on a single discipline.
Right, she pulls from a lot of different areas.
She really does. She weaves together rigorous, modern psychological science, specifically acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, with ancient contemplative traditions, and modern interpersonal neurobiology.
And for those unfamiliar with ACT, it's not about...
Right. It's not about changing the content of your difficult thoughts. It's about changing your relationship to them.
Yeah.
Developing what we call psychological flexibility.
Okay, yeah.
The whole goal is to move you away from that frantic bird-at-the-window panic and toward a state of aligned, purposeful action.
Let's start with the foundational piece, which falls under the very first task. Get curious. Because before you can figure out where to direct your effort or even how to open up, you really have to understand the raw material you're actually working with.
Exactly.
The book refers to this as your genius energy. Now, I have to say, when I hear the word genius, my mind immediately defaults to, standardized testing.
Oh, totally. IQ scores.
Right. I think of the Stanford Binet intelligence scales or, Mensa memberships or some math prodigy solving impossible equations on a chalkboard.
And that is the modern, highly sanitized, and frankly restrictive definition of the word.
Yeah.
To really understand genius energy in this context, we actually need to look at the etymology. The term traces all the way back to ancient Roman religion.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, a genius was not a measure of cognitive processing speed at all. It was considered a guardian spirit. Yeah. It was this divine entity that was believed to watch over a person or a family or even a specific place right from the moment of birth. And over centuries, the concept evolved to represent the unique, animating character or spirit of an individual.
That makes so much more sense.
So when this framework talks about your genius energy, it's talking about your unique life force. It's the specific well of characteristics, talents, and intuitive strengths that you just naturally possess.
Okay, so the book breaks this unique life force down into a genius energy spiral, comprising 5 distinct aspects that sort of interlock. Let's unpack those.
Let's do it.
The first aspect is personality. This is basically the lens through which you naturally interact with the world. We're talking about traits like introversion versus extroversion, or, your baseline level of openness to new experiences.
Yeah, and your personality essentially acts as the delivery mechanism for your genius.
Delivery mechanism, I like that.
Think about how 2 people might possess a genuine genius for leadership, but their personalities dictate vastly different expressions of it.
Right.
An extroverted leader might use their energy to really galvanize a room, building consensus through just sheer charisma and vocal passion.
The classic CEO type.
Right, but then an introverted leader, maybe one with high conscientiousness, might lead by foreseeing logistical crises, building really robust systems, and just quietly ensuring every single team member has what they need to succeed.
Neither is inherently better.
Exactly. But if the introvert tries to mimic the extrovert's delivery mechanism, they are going to burn out so rapidly.
It's like wearing shoes that are 3 sizes too big.
Exactly.
Okay, so the second aspect is talents. This is a bit closer to our modern idea of giftedness, but definitely much broader. It includes cognitive aptitudes, sure, like spatial visualization.
Right.
Like, we all know someone who can look at a pile of 200 IKEA parts in a super confusing manual and just intuitively understand how the 3D puzzle fits together without crying.
I am definitely not that person.
Me neither. But talent also includes things like physical endurance or the ability to generate rapid-fire creative ideas during a brainstorm.
Yeah, talents are essentially the actions that have a really high rate of return for you.
Okay.
They come easily, perhaps almost unnoticeably to you, but they might require immense draining effort for someone else to replicate.
That makes sense. Then we have the third aspect, which is interests. This is what you actually care about, what draws your attention when you aren't being forced to look at something.
Yes.
The book ties this to the psychological state of flow, that concept popularized by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, where you become so absorbed in an activity that time just seems to vanish.
Interests are the emotional and psychological fuel. You could have a profound talent for accounting, right? You're great at the math, but if you have zero interest in it, applying that talent will always feel like a burden.
It's just a slog.
Completely. Flow state occurs when your talents are perfectly matched with your interest, which creates this amazing self-sustaining loop of energy.
Okay, the fourth aspect brings in a moral layer, which is interesting. Character strengths. This pulls heavily from Martin Seligman's pioneering work in positive psychology. We are talking about virtues here. Are you naturally brave in the face of uncertainty? Do you have this unwavering commitment to honesty? Or a really profound daily sense of gratitude?
And this is where we really have to differentiate a skill from a virtue.
How so?
Well, a talent can be used for anything, good or bad. Character strengths dictate the ethical direction of your energy.
Oh,
They determine whether your effort contributes to a meaningful life or merely a successful one on paper.
that's a huge distinction. And finally, the fifth aspect in this spiral is emotional intelligence. This is the ability to read the subtle emotional shifts in a room.
Crucial skill.
Yeah, the capacity to sit with a friend who is grieving deeply without feeling that anxious compulsion to offer unsolicited advice or try to fix their sadness. And it's also the internal awareness required to just manage your own emotional regulation.
Yeah, emotional intelligence is basically the governor of the whole system. Without it, your talents and your personality can easily become really disruptive. It allows you to modulate your energy based on the context of whatever situation you're in and the people around you.
So thinking about these 5 aspects, personality, talents, interests, character strengths, and emotional intelligence swirling together, it honestly reminds me of character creation in a really complex role-playing game.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. You start the game by distributing points into different stats. If you build a wizard, you dump all your points into intelligence, spellcasting, and mana, but you leave your physical strength and your armor stats incredibly low.
Naturally.
If you then try to play that wizard by charging to the front lines of a battle with a rusty sword, trying to punch armored knights, you are going to be defeated instantly.
You'd be wiped out.
You have to know your specific stat build to strategize correctly. But let's look at the reality for a lot of people. What if a listener is sitting here right now thinking, I don't really have a stat build. I'm not particularly talented. I don't have these grand passions. I'm just getting by. How does someone unearth this genius if it feels entirely buried?
I'm so glad you asked that, because it is a very common and, frankly, very painful feeling to be disconnected from your own capabilities.
Especially if you've spent years in environments that didn't value your specific traits.
Exactly. A really helpful way to approach this is to stop looking inward for a moment and just observe nature.
Okay.
The book points out that nature exhibits genius energy just effortlessly. Consider an oak tree.
An oak tree.
Yeah, its genius is deep-rooted stability. The biological reality is that simply standing in a mature oak grove has a measurable effect on human physiology.
Wait, really?
Yes, it can actually lower blood pressure and decrease cortisol levels.
Yeah.
Furthermore, an oak tree's relatively small leaves are a genius evolutionary adaptation to minimize water loss, which allows it to survive devastating droughts.
Right.
The oak tree does not expend any energy wishing it were a pine tree or a willow. It just leans entirely into its oakness.
It doesn't fight its own biology.
Exactly. So to find your own stats, as you put it, you often have to look at your history of survival. Our deepest genius is frequently forged in the absolute fires of our hardships.
That makes a lot of sense.
If you grew up in a highly volatile, unpredictable household, you might have developed a genius for hypervigilance, an ability to read a room's microexpressions instantly to keep yourself safe.
Yeah, scanning for danger.
Right. Or if you were left to your own devices a lot, you might have developed a really profound genius for self-sufficiency and solitary problem solving. Look at what traits, behaviors, or instincts you automatically rely on when your back is firmly against the wall. That survival mechanism is the raw ore of your genius energy.
That reframing changes everything, honestly. It really takes the pressure off needing to be like a piano prodigy and validates the skills we develop just to navigate a really messy world.
Absolutely.
But this brings us to a really sharp, somewhat terrifying turn in the framework. Once you identify that immense, potent energy, the book warns that it is the exact same energy that will completely ruin you if you aren't careful.
Yeah.
The text actually states, your genius, that very force that fuels you, becomes your problem if it's used unwisely.
This is perhaps the most crucial insight of the entire Get Curious phase. We tend to view our strengths as universally positive.
Right, a strength is a strength.
But energy is just force. If it's misdirected, over-applied, or applied in the wrong context entirely, it becomes incredibly destructive. When people find themselves deeply stuck in a cycle of suffering, it is almost never because they lack energy or willpower.
Really?
Yeah, it's because their primary genius energy has basically tangled itself into a really rigid knot.
To illustrate this internal rigidity, the author introduces a metaphor, the Rubik's Cube of struggle. Now, usually when people talk about a Rubik's Cube, they mean solving a puzzle, matching the colors.
Right.
But here, the focus is on the mechanics of the cube itself. Think about it. You have the colored squares on the outside that you twist and turn. But underneath those squares, hiding right in the center, is a core mechanism, a cross-shaped pivot that dictates how all the other pieces move.
Yes.
The book suggests that the external problems in your life are just the colored squares on the surface. Today, the red side is a conflict with your boss. Next month, the blue side is a sudden financial crisis. The year after that, the green side is a health scare.
It's always something.
The surface problems constantly shift, but the central pivot mechanism, the internal, rigid way you misuse your genius energy to cope with stress, that never changes.
And if that central pivot is jammed because you only know how to react one specific way, say, by working obsessively or shutting down emotionally, it really doesn't matter what colors you try to align on the surface.
The cube won't turn smoothly.
Exactly. You will just apply more and more force to the surface pieces until the plastic eventually just snaps.
Let's ground this in a real human story from the book. There is an exercise called the Nightmare Review, and it is introduced through a client named Michael.
Ah, Michael's story.
Yeah, Michael is a podcaster and a coach living in Vienna, and he is facing a deeply unfair, basically terrifying puzzle. He has a progressive neuromuscular condition, the disease is advancing steadily, and he's approaching a threshold where he will just lose his physical independence.
It's a devastating reality.
And when that happens, he will have to leave his beloved Vienna and move back to Germany to receive the necessary care. So he's looking at his remaining capable time in Vienna and agonizing over how to allocate his energy.
Which is such an impossible choice.
Right. Does he pour every ounce of focus into his physical health, trying to delay the progression? Does he hustle aggressively to build his coaching business so he has financial security later? Or does he just accept the inevitable, burn through his savings, and spend his days enjoying art and leisure while he still can?
It is an existential crossroads that would paralyze absolutely anyone. Now, Michael possesses a specific genius. He is highly motivated, he's socially captivating, and intellectually driven.
Very high stats in those areas.
Very high. But in the face of this terrifying diagnosis, his genius energy was just spinning in circles. He was caught in this state of chronic indecision, absolutely terrified of making the wrong choice.
Yeah.
So, to break this paralysis, he was asked to form the Nightmare Review.
Okay, how does that work?
The prompt is pretty simple. Imagine it is a year from now. You are looking back at how you handled this specific period of your life, and you are writing a review. But this is the worst-case scenario. What does the honest 1-star or 2-star review of your life look like if you continue on your current path of indecision?
Michael's 2-star review was haunting. He admitted that his absolute nightmare was becoming an Olympic-level procrastinator.
Yes.
He visualized this future where he spent his remaining time in Vienna doing a tiny, fragmented bit of health maintenance, a reluctant, unfocused bit of work, and just a guilt-ridden bit of leisure.
He would effectively half-ass everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He saw himself wasting hours on minor work projects he didn't even care about just as an avoidance tactic, ultimately missing out on proactive, deep connections with his friends before he was actually forced to leave the country.
The Nightmare Review is powerful because it uses our natural tendency for catastrophic thinking productively, for once.
Oh, that's true.
It forces you to look clearly at the collateral damage of misdirecting your energy. When we find our lives heading toward that 1-star review, it is typically because we have fallen into one of 3 specific behavioral traps.
Right.
These traps are the mechanisms that hijack our genius.
Let's dissect these 3 traps. The first trap is called running away, and the author anchors this with a classic Buddhist parable about tigers.
The premise here is simple. If a literal 400-pound Bengal tiger is chasing you through a jungle, running away is the most evolutionarily sound, brilliant use of your energy.
Highly recommend running in that scenario.
Highly recommend. The problem is that the human brain cannot easily distinguish between a biological threat to our lives and a psychological threat to our ego.
Oh, wow.
In our modern context, the tigers we run from are internal. We run from the discomfort of vulnerability, the dread of failure, the sting of rejection, or just the weight of grief. And we use our genius to execute the escape.
Give me an example of that.
So a highly intellectual person might use their genius for analysis to endlessly intellectualize their trauma, successfully avoiding ever having to actually feel the sadness.
I see.
Or a highly capable, organized person might use their genius for productivity to schedule every single minute of their day, successfully outrunning their baseline anxiety.
Okay, that productivity one hits really close to home. You look incredibly successful on the outside to everyone else, but internally, you're just fleeing. But eventually, you run out of runway, right? The anxiety catches up.
It always does. Avoidance is basically a high-interest loan. You get short-term relief, but the emotional debt compounds massively.
Which brings us to the second trap, holding too tightly, which actually continues that same tiger parable. So the story goes. A woman is running through the wilderness, being chased by a ferocious tiger. She reaches the edge of a sheer cliff. With the tiger closing in, she scrambles over the edge and shinnies down a thick vine.
Very cinematic.
Very. She pauses halfway down, breathing heavily, only to look below and see a second tiger prowling at the bottom of the ravine just waiting for her.
Not great.
No. She is trapped between 2 certain deaths. But as she hangs there, she notices a small, wild strawberry growing out of a crevice in the cliff face right next to her. She reaches out with one hand, plucks the strawberry, and puts it in her mouth. And in that moment, it is the most vibrant, sweet, delicious strawberry she has ever tasted.
It is a profound meditation on the capacity of the human mind to find presence, beauty, and joy, even when surrounded by absolute peril.
Yeah.
However, the framework asks us to consider What happens next if she falls into the second trap?
What if she holds too tightly?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What if she grabs that strawberry, but instead of savoring it, she thinks, this is the only good thing I have left. I must protect it.
Oh.
If she grips that delicate strawberry with all her strength out of a desperate fear of dropping it, she will crush it. It will turn to mush in her palm. We do this with our lives constantly.
We really do.
When we hold too tightly to our expectations of how our career should look, or how our partner should behave, or our desperate need to control an uncontrollable outcome, we just squeeze the vitality and joy right out of the experience.
Okay, I need to push back on this concept, though. I understand the poetry of the strawberry, it's beautiful, but let's apply this to the real world. What if holding tightly isn't about control, but about necessary survival?
Okay, give me an example.
Imagine a startup founder who has 3 months of runway left before they have to fire their entire team. Or a parent advocating for a child with a rare disease in a completely broken medical system. They have to grip the outcome. They have to be rigid in their determination because the alternative is complete catastrophe. How is that a trap?
That is a phenomenal distinction to draw, and it cuts right to the heart of what wise effort actually means in practice.
Okay.
The framework does not suggest you abandon your goals or adopt this passive whatever happens, happens attitude. The distinction lies in where your grip is focused. Are you gripping your values, or are you gripping a highly specific, inflexible outcome?
Walk me through the difference for that startup founder.
If the founder is gripping their values, perhaps innovation, providing for their team, and solving a really meaningful problem, they will work with fierce determination.
Right.
But they will remain psychologically flexible. If the current product fails, they can pivot. If the company goes under, it's a tragedy. But their identity is intact because they acted in accordance with their values to the bitter end.
But if they grip the outcome,
If they are holding too tightly to the outcome like, I must be a millionaire CEO by age 30 or I am a complete failure, their genius for determination becomes a trap of rigidity.
I see.
They will ignore market feedback, they will destroy their physical health, they will lie to investors, and they will burn relationships, all to force an outcome that might not even be possible. They crush the strawberry of their own life, trying to force reality to bend to their expectation.
Okay, that clarifies it perfectly. The persistence is the asset. The rigid attachment to the specific picture in your head is the trap.
Exactly.
And this actually leads directly into the author's own vulnerability in the book. Diana Hill shares a story about falling into this exact trap.
Yes, she does.
She was co-hosting a psychology podcast that was wildly successful. We are talking millions of downloads, lucrative sponsorships, interviewing the absolute titans of the psychology field. From the outside, it was the pinnacle of professional achievement in her niche. But internally, she was suffering. She was having severe panic attacks in her car before team meetings.
She realized, slowly and painfully, that the project just no longer aligned with her evolving values.
Yeah.
She felt this really deep yearning to explore concepts outside the rigid boundaries of strict evidence-based behavioral psychology concepts involving spirituality, contemplative practices, and broader human experiences.
But she was terrified to walk away from something so successful.
Completely terrified. And this is where her specific genius weaponized against her. Her core genius was persistence.
A trait that is universally praised.
Yes, and a trait that had historically saved her life. Her persistence was the very fuel she used to recover from a severe eating disorder in her youth. It was the fuel she used to endure the grueling process of earning a PhD.
Right.
But in the context of this podcast, her genius for persistence was being used unwisely. She was using it to endure a situation she desperately needed to exit. She was holding too tightly to the success she had built, rather than opening her hands to what she actually valued.
Her greatest strength was the lock on her own cage. That is a sobering thought. Which brings us to the final trap, stuck in a story.
Yes.
This is the cognitive trap. It happens when we fuse our identity with outdated, borrowed, or culturally enforced narratives. We walk around telling ourselves, I am just not a numbers person, or I am too sensitive to handle leadership, or I am damaged goods because of my divorce.
Right, we just repeat it over and over.
We take our dynamic, fluid genius energy and we cram it into this tiny, suffocating box made of limiting beliefs.
And once you believe the story, your brain will proactively look for evidence to confirm it, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of unwise effort.
So task 1 involves getting curious about our unique genius and auditing how we might be trapping it by running away, holding too tightly, or getting stuck in stories. But all of this sounds very internal.
It is.
We don't exist as floating brains in a vacuum, though. Recognizing internal traps is kind of useless if we don't examine the water we are swimming in.
That is the crucial third component of getting curious, analyzing your context. Your physical and emotional environment profoundly impacts your capacity to access and direct your genius. The book categorizes our environment into supporters and depleters, and it starts at the most microscopic level, our biology.
This section fascinated me because it grounds abstract psychology and hard cellular biology. The book focuses on mitochondria. Now, most of us vaguely remember from high school biology that, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
Classic textbook phrase.
Right. But the book explains how they actually interact with our psychological state. When we experience chronic stress, when we are constantly running from psychological tigers, our bodies flood with cortisol and adrenaline. This signals the mitochondria that we are in absolute danger, and they drastically speed up their metabolic rate to give us energy to fight or flee.
But there is a biological tax for that accelerated metabolism.
Oh, yeah.
It creates a massive increase in oxidative stress-free radicals that literally damage the cell. Chronic psychological stress literally ages our cells at a microscopic level by burning out the mitochondria.
That's wild.
If your cellular batteries are degraded, your genius energy doesn't even have the physical voltage required to turn on. You experience this as brain fog, chronic fatigue, and just general emotional brittleness.
The antidote the book provides isn't some magical supplement, though. It calls things like deep sleep and specific types of exercise mitochondria medicine.
Because those interventions deal with the root mechanism.
Yeah.
Exercise, particularly cardiovascular and resistance training, introduces acute manageable stress hormesis that triggers the body to actually build new, more efficient mitochondria.
Wow.
And deep restorative sleep clears the metabolic waste products that accumulated during the day. If you skip these biological foundations, trying to practice wise effort is like trying to run a supercomputer on an AA battery.
It's just not going to boot up. From the biology of the individual, the context expands outward to our relationships. The text uses a deeply evocative phrase here. It says, "We are tuning forks for the people around us."
This is rooted in interpersonal neurobiology and polyvagal theory.
Mm.
Our nervous systems are not closed loops at all.
Right.
We possess mirror neurons, and our brains are constantly, subconsciously scanning the people around us for cues of safety or danger. If you strike a tuning fork in a room, another tuning fork of the same pitch will begin to vibrate sympathetically.
Humans do the exact same thing.
We do. If you spend your day surrounded by people who are chronically anxious, cynical, or combative, your nervous system will begin to hum at that exact same frequency of distress. Positive energizers amplify your genius, but relational depleters can drain your life force before a single word is even spoken.
And beyond one-on-one relationships, there is the macro context. The workplace, societal structures, and our general life circumstances. The environment can be systematically designed to just crush a person's genius.
It can.
The book illustrates this with the story of a woman named Giselle. Giselle is a highly educated, deeply capable attorney. Her specific genius was persuasion, the ability to construct compelling arguments and shift people's perspectives.
Which is great for an attorney.
Fantastic. However, Giselle was a woman of color working in a predominantly white male, highly toxic corporate law firm. She was constantly facing microaggressions, being talked over in meetings, and having her expertise questioned at every turn.
In a supportive environment, her genius for persuasion would have made her a legendary litigator.
Absolutely.
But in a toxic, marginalizing environment, her energy had literally nowhere safe to go. So what happened? The energy inverted.
Oh, no.
Giselle subconsciously turned her incredible persuasive skills inward against herself. She began constructing brilliant, airtight, highly persuasive arguments to convince herself that she was an imposter, that she was broken, and that she didn't deserve her position.
It is a devastating example of how systemic barriers warp human potential. But it raises a very difficult question for me. If someone is listening and they are in a situation exactly like Giselle's, where the external systemic barriers of racism, sexism, or just a deeply abusive corporate culture seem entirely entrenched and out of their control, how does this framework actually help? How do you rely on internal wise effort when the external world is actively hostile?
That is the ultimate test of the framework. And what is vital here is that the author does not peddle toxic positivity.
Good.
The book does not suggest that if Giselle just thinks positively or meditates enough, the systemic discrimination will somehow vanish. It acknowledges the brutal reality of uncontrollable environments. The strategy it offers is a radical pivot. You must stop chasing external outcomes and instead anchor yourself to internal values. Values must become your compass when the map is literally burning.
Okay, break down the distinction between an outcome and a value in that hostile environment.
Sure, an outcome is contingent on other people. An outcome is getting the promotion, earning the respect of a toxic boss, or changing the corporate culture entirely. You can expend massive amounts of energy pursuing those outcomes and still fail because you simply do not control the variables.
Right.
A value, however, is how you choose to behave in the present moment, regardless of the outcome. A value is choosing to show up with dignity, demonstrating intellectual rigor, or advocating for the truth.
So for Giselle.
For Giselle, the toxic environment might not change, but by realigning with her values, she reclaims her psychological agency. She stops burning energy trying to persuade an unpersuadable system to validate her, and she stops persuading herself she is worthless. She redirects her energy toward her values, which eventually empowers her to set ironclad boundaries or strategize her exit to a firm that actually deserves her.
The book describes the feeling of living in alignment with those internal values as experiencing life at its most lifey. Such a quirky phrase, but it captures that visceral bodily sensation of being fully, vibrantly congruent, even when your external circumstances are objectively painful.
Because values are not just abstract intellectual concepts, they are felt somatic experiences. You feel it in your chest when you act in alignment with your deepest truths.
Right.
But as we all know, accessing that deep truth and redirecting our behavior is incredibly difficult when our minds are just spinning out of control.
Which requires us to transition to the second core task of the framework.
Right.
So we have gotten curious, we understand our genius, the traps of running, gripping, and storytelling, and we've audited our environment. Now we have to execute task 2, open up. Because you can have all the insight in the world, but if your mind is throwing up massive roadblocks of anxiety and your emotions are overwhelming you, you won't be able to redirect your effort anywhere.
We have to learn to collaborate with our internal experience rather than going to war with it. The first step of opening up is opening the mind. And the author provides a wonderfully absurd, highly relatable analogy for the human mind. The rooster neighbor.
I loved this story so much. During the height of the pandemic, when everyone was stuck at home, the author's neighbors decided to get a pet. And of all the quiet, unobtrusive pets they could have chosen, they got a rooster.
A rooster.
And every single morning, predictably, this rooster would start screaming at the crack of dawn. The author tried everything to control the situation. She bought heavy-duty earplugs. She ran multiple white noise machines. She obsessively closed every window in the house. She spent hours seething with anger and fantasizing about confronting the neighbors.
None of it worked?
Nothing worked. The rooster kept crowing, and her suffering only increased because she was dedicating all her energy to trying to control the uncontrollable.
The rooster is the perfect metaphor for our intrusive, anxious, or just unhelpful thoughts. Your mind is an organ designed to generate thoughts to keep you safe.
Right.
It will generate worries, self-criticisms, and worst-case scenarios relentlessly. You cannot fundamentally stop your mind from producing thoughts any more easily than you can silence a neighbor's rooster. And the core tenet of ECT therapy is that the effort you spend trying to suppress, argue with, or eliminate unwanted thoughts is actually what causes your psychological suffering. Trying not to think about the rooster basically ensures you are constantly listening for the rooster.
It feels like having a hyper-aggressive email spam filter. My brain constantly flags perfectly normal, safe situations like sending a minor email or speaking up in a meeting and tags them with massive red letters. Danger, catastrophe imminent.
Absolutely.
But if I can't just delete the spam folder, how do I function? How do I train myself to look at my internal inbox without getting completely hijacked by the junk mail my brain is generating?
The mechanism you need to develop is cognitive flexibility, specifically a skill called cognitive diffusion. Yes. This means learning to observe the thought without fusing your identity to it or taking it as literal truth. You move away from rigid, either thinking, and embrace the paradox of both hand.
Give me an example of what that inner dialogue sounds like in real time.
So instead of saying, I am a total failure and I'm going to bomb this presentation, which is fusion, you create distance.
Okay.
You say, I notice I am having the thought that I am a failure. You acknowledge the thought is present, but you don't buy into its narrative. You embrace both hand. I am experiencing the thought that I am an imposter, and I am going to walk into this meeting and present my data anyway.
Wow.
You learn to let the rooster crow in the background without letting it dictate whether you enjoy your morning coffee.
And a key part of developing that distance is realizing that your loud, buzzing, analytical brain isn't the only form of intelligence you possess. The book introduces this concept of the heart mind. It references the Buddhist concept of citta. This is a deeper, intuitive, somatic wisdom that exists entirely separate from the frantic, problem-solving chatter of the prefrontal cortex.
But trusting that intuitive heart-mind requires us to do something deeply uncomfortable. We have to open up to our emotions.
Oh, yes.
For most of us, this is the scariest part of the framework. We expend vast reserves of our genius energy, utilizing avoidance strategies specifically so we do not have to feel raw pain, grief, or terror.
To address this, the book introduces a practice developed by a Buddhist teacher named Lama Tsultrim Alyon called Feeding Your Demons. Now, despite the name, it is not an exorcism.
Right, no exorcisms here.
It is actually a profound psychological exercise in subject-object relation. Instead of fighting your difficult emotions or trying to numb them, you invite them in. You visualize the emotion, you give it a form and a name, you metaphorically sit down with it, and you ask it a direct question. What do you need?
It is a radical subversion of our instincts. We treat our painful emotions as enemies, demons to be slain.
Yeah.
Our emotions are just neurochemical signals. They are messengers. And they often point directly to our most fundamental human yearnings, the yearning to connect, to feel competent, or to be safe. When you stop fighting the feeling of anxiety and instead personify it and ask, what do you need? The anxiety might surprise you.
What might it say?
It might answer, I need you to set a boundary with your mother, or I need you to sleep for 8 hours. By feeding the emotion what it actually needs, reassurance, rest, boundaries, the demon transforms to an ally.
But practically speaking, inviting profound grief or intense panic to pull up a chair and have a chat is incredibly overwhelming. If you are already at your breaking point, opening the door to the demon feels like it will destroy you.
Which is exactly why the framework emphasizes the necessity of centering practices before you even attempt this.
Oh, okay.
Things like structured breath work, repeating a grounding mantra, or even physical grounding exercise like just feeling your feet on the floor. However, there is a massive misconception about the mechanism of these practices that the book goes out of its way to correct.
Yes, the book is very explicit about this. We are not using centering practices to magically make the bad feelings disappear.
Precisely. If you are doing deep breathing with the desperate goal of making your anxiety go away, you are just falling right back into the trap of running away. You are using a wellness tool for avoidance.
Oh, that's such a trap.
The true mechanism of centering is to widen your window of tolerance. You are anchoring your nervous system, engaging the parasympathetic rest and digest response so that you find the stability required to stay with the uncomfortable feeling longer.
Yeah.
You drop an anchor in the storm, not to stop the wind, but to keep your boat from capsizing while the storm passes over you.
So if I can practice cognitive diffusion, observing my thoughts without believing them, and I can widen my tolerance to sit with my emotions without running away from them, it begs a massive philosophical question. If I am not the thoughts in my head, and I am not the feelings in my body, who am I?
And exploring that question leads us to the final component of opening up, expanding the wise self.
There is a revealing exercise in the book about this. The author asks, who am I? If you ask someone in a Western, highly individualistic culture to point to themselves, almost universally, they will point a finger straight to the center of their chest.
Yeah, right here.
The implication is, I am right here. I am a distinct, isolated entity contained entirely inside this bag of skin and bones. But the framework challenges the rigidity of that boundary.
Because that rigid boundary is where we trap ourselves with absolute language. We cling to I am statements as if they are permanent tattoos on our soul.
Right.
I am bad with money. I am unlovable. I am a failure. The text offers a remarkably simple but cognitively profound tool to loosen this trap. You simply take your absolute statement and add the word sometimes to the very end.
I am bad with money. Sometimes I am a failure. Sometimes.
Exactly. The addition of that single word immediately creates psychological space. It breaks a fusion. It reminds your brain that you are not a fixed monolithic object. You are a dynamic, ever-changing process reacting to different contexts.
And once you soften that rigid boundary of the self, you start to realize how intimately connected you are to everything else. The book brings in the teachings of Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, specifically his concept of second bodies. The premise is that we never accomplish anything in a vacuum.
Never.
The people who support us, the people we care for, the mentors who taught us, the ancestors whose genetic material we carry, they're literally our second bodies. Dr. Dan Siegel, a pioneer in interpersonal neurobiology, describes this as the necessary evolutionary shift from a mindset of me to a mindset of we, which he combines into the concept of the MWe.
It is the realization that your wise self is inherently expansive. Your identity and your energy are not confined to your physical body. They exist in the network of relationships you sustain.
I have to admit, I struggle with this a bit.
Really? How so?
I understand the beauty of interconnectedness, but doesn't adopting this second body or MWe mindset risk eroding personal accountability? If I view myself as just a node in a giant collective web, how do I maintain necessary personal boundaries? If my boss is toxic, but he's part of them, I just have to accept his bad behavior. How do I take responsibility for my individual mistakes if I'm just part of a collective?
It is a totally valid fear, but true interconnectedness actually demands higher accountability, not lower.
Okay, explain that.
Seeing yourself as part of a MWe does not absolve you of responsibility. It illuminates the profound ripple effect of your actions. If you believe you are an isolated island, your destructive habits only hurt you, so who cares? But if you realize you are part of a MWe, you recognize that your unwise efforts drag your second bodies down with you, and your wise choices uplift them.
I see.
As for boundaries, they become even more critical in this model.
Yeah.
You cannot support the collective if your individual biological battery is drained. Setting a boundary with a toxic boss isn't selfish. It is the responsible action required to protect the energy you need to serve the rest of your community.
That reframing makes total sense. You have to secure your own oxygen mask first, specifically because you are essential to the MWe. And it's opening up to this expanded, fluid sense of self that finally allows us to open up to behavioral change. This is perfectly illustrated in the book by the story of Kelly.
Kelly's story is one of the most powerful testaments of the book to finding agency when the external circumstances offer absolutely no hope.
Kelly was in the very early, incredibly fragile stages of addiction recovery. He was working at a group home for individuals with profound intellectual disabilities, and he was being paid $4 an hour. He was living on the absolute margins. Every single day, he was fighting a brutal internal battle against a brain that was screaming at him that his life was pointless, that the work was meaningless, and that he should just give up and relapse. His environment was depleting, his biology was healing from trauma, and his mind was a hostile place.
Just a completely stacked deck against him.
Exactly. So to survive, he utilized a tiny intervention. In the dark, early hours of the morning before his shift, he would write on little Post-it notes. He would write things like, "If just for today, if I could not hurt anyone, if I could just do my job, that would be pretty great."
What Kelly was doing intuitively was utilizing the cycle of wise habits. In the depths of neurological and situational despair, he located a microscopic gap between stimulus and response, what psychologists call a choice point.
A choice point.
Yeah, he couldn't change his hourly wage, and he couldn't instantly cure his addiction. But in that choice point, he applied a wise effort skill. He set a small, highly achievable, values-aligned intention.
The cycle has 3 parts: choice point, wise effort skill, and then the intrinsic reward. The reward for Kelly wasn't a bonus check or a promotion.
No.
The reward was the quiet dignity of getting to the end of a grueling day and realizing, I didn't cause harm today. And that intrinsic dopamine hit, however small, built the neurological foundation to try again the next day.
He was slowly, deliberately rewriting his neural pathways through values-based action. And that brings us to the final and most actionable phase of the entire framework. We have gotten curious about the mechanics of our energy. We have opened up to our minds, emotions, and expansive selves. Now we must execute task 3. Focus your energy.
This is where the rubber meets the road. We are taking this aligned, understood genius energy and deliberately deploying it into the real world. And the book argues that the very first place we must focus it is on our closest connections, our relationships.
The scientific backing for prioritizing relationships cannot be overstated here. The text relies on the Harvard Study of Adult Development, directed by Robert Waldinger. This is arguably the most comprehensive longitudinal study on human thriving ever conducted, tracking participants for 85 years.
85 years.
Yes. The definitive, undeniable finding from decades of data is that the quality of our close relationships is the single most significant predictor of our physical health, our cognitive longevity, and our overall happiness. It actually matters more than cholesterol levels, social class, or genetics.
Knowing that, we have to treat our relationship energy with extreme diligence. The author suggests creating a relationship energy map. You essentially take inventory of the people in your life and plot them into three distinct categories: positive energizers, depleting energizers, and mixed energizers.
Yeah.
It feels very much like an accountant auditing a financial balance sheet. You have people who are investments, they deposit energy, inspiration, and safety into your accounts. And then you have people who are taxes. Every interaction with them results in a massive withdrawal of your genius energy.
We all know a few taxes.
Oh, absolutely. If you have too many taxes and not enough investments, you just go into emotional bankruptcy.
It is a stark but highly necessary audit. Once you map it out, the mandate is clear. You must consciously choose to allocate more time and presence to the positive energizers who amplify your genius. For the depleters, you must utilize your wise effort to construct firm, protective boundaries. And in some cases, focusing your energy in relationships requires engaging in the difficult process of forgiveness.
Forgiveness is always such a fraught topic, though. It often feels like you are being asked to sacrifice your own justice for someone else's comfort.
Which is exactly why the text reframes it entirely through the lens of energy conservation. Forgiveness in this framework is not about condoning the harm. It is not about telling the person who wronged you that their behavior was somehow acceptable.
Good, because that never works.
Right. It is actually a selfish act.
Okay.
In the best sense of the word. Holding on to deep resentment is an active process. It requires massive, daily expenditures of your genius energy just to keep the anger burning. Forgiveness is the act of opening up to the pain of the past, specifically so you can sever that energetic cord. You stop funding the resentment, which frees up all that precious capital to be invested back into your own life.
You are taking your capital back. That makes total sense. And speaking of capital, we have to talk about the physical vessel that generates and carries all this energy: the body.
The body is not just a vehicle for the brain. It is the generator. If you want to focus your energy outward, you must first focus it inward by tuning into somatic signals.
To make this practical, the book provides an acronym for checking in with the body: HEART. It stands for hunger, emotion, activity, rest, and tension. It's designed as a quick somatic scan to figure out what your physical plant actually requires in the moment, rather than what your anxious mind thinks you should do.
Let's break down the mechanics of that heart scan. You pause and ask, am I physiologically hungry, or am I just eating to soothe an emotion? What core emotion is currently present in my chest or gut?
Right.
Does my body need activity to burn off excess cortisol, or does it desperately need restorative rest? And where am I holding muscular tension? By answering these questions, you bypass the cognitive noise and access the body's native intelligence.
And accessing that intelligence leads to what might be my favorite concept in the entire book: the whole body yes versus the whole body no.
This concept is the ultimate bridge between the busy, analytical brain and the intuitive heart-mind. When you are faced with a decision, say, an invitation to join a new committee at work, your prefrontal cortex will immediately generate a list of shoulds.
Always.
It will tell you that you should do it for the networking, or you ought to do it because it looks good on a resume, but your body reacts differently. It reacts with somatic markers.
What does a whole body yes actually feel like?
A whole body yes feels expansive. You might notice your posture naturally opening up, your breathing becoming deeper, a sense of lightness in your chest, or literally a subtle leaning forward into the opportunity.
Okay.
It feels aligned. A whole body no, on the other hand, feels contractive. It's a tightening in the gut, a heaviness in the shoulders, a shallowing of the breath. Even if your brain is screaming that it's a great opportunity, if your body gives you a whole body no, taking the opportunity will require an exhausting expenditure of unwise effort.
It's about customizing your life: how you eat, how you choose to exercise, how you rest based on your internal values and your somatic signals, rather than blindly following the latest optimization trend on the internet. And the book makes a point to emphasize the necessity of making deliberate space for physical pleasure.
Pleasure is not a luxury in this framework. It is a biological imperative. Safe, mindful pleasure activates the parasympathetic nervous system, actively replenishing the genius energy that chronic stress constantly depletes.
So, we have focused our energy inward to heal our biology and outward to secure our close relationships. The final frontier the book explores is how we project this wise effort into the wider world through work, creativity, and community.
Let's examine the domain of work. The data is deeply troubling. The text cites a Gallup poll revealing that 15% of employees globally are actively disengaged.
Actively disengaged.
Yes, that doesn't mean they're just a little bored.
Mhm.
Actively disengaged means they are fundamentally disconnected from their tasks, resentful of their environment, and actively spreading negativity. They are trapped in a massive cycle of unwise effort, likely because their unique genius is being ignored or punished.
But the author presents a counterargument. You don't necessarily need a glamorous job to apply your genius. You can bring your unique energy into almost any role.
You really can.
She shares a great story about her very first job working at a retail office supply store. On paper, it's a mundane, repetitive job, but she found a way to activate her genius for deep connection and meticulous detail. She would spend time matching the exact millimeter thickness of mechanical pencil lead to her customers' specific vocational needs, ensuring an architect got the precise 0.3 millimeter lead for technical drawing, while a student got the sturdy 0.9 millimeter.
It's a great example.
She found a way to experience flow and provide value in an environment that most people would write off as meaningless.
And her story challenges a lot of the conventional wisdom we hold about success and mastery. Specifically, the book takes direct aim at Malcolm Gladwell's famous 10,000-hour rule, which posits that world-class mastery in any field simply requires 10,000 hours of deliberate practice.
Right, the 10,000 hours.
The author of Wise Effort argues that this equation is fundamentally flawed. 10,000 hours of grinding effort is practically useless and often psychologically damaging if those hours are logged in isolation. Without a supportive community, without honest feedback, and without a connection to your deeper values.
Because you could spend 10,000 hours aggressively flying straight into the kitchen window.
Exactly that. Effort devoid of wisdom and context is just a recipe for profound exhaustion.
And this necessity for context applies heavily to creativity as well. The book highlights that you cannot simply force creativity by staring harder at a blank screen. Context generates the spark. The author shares her own process. When she is stuck on a complex psychological concept, she doesn't sit at her desk and grind. She puts on her shoes and physically runs up into the hills in her coastal town, getting above the literal fog line.
She changes the context.
Right. She puts her body in an expansive, dynamic environment to allow her genius energy the space to synthesize ideas.
Which ultimately brings us to the broadest, most impactful application of Wise Effort: community. This is the culmination of the framework, where individual genius energy transcends the self and transforms into collective structural power.
To build genuine community, especially in a deeply polarized world, the book recommends a specific contemplative practice called Just Like Me. It is designed to rapidly build empathy, particularly with strangers or individuals you find difficult.
It's a very powerful practice.
The practice is simple. You observe someone, and you silently recite a series of reminders to yourself. Just like me, this person experiences physical pain. Just like me, this person is afraid of failure. Just like me, they deeply desire to be happy and loved.
It is an incredibly effective cognitive tool to dismantle the illusion of separation. It shifts you out of the hyper-individualistic ego and engages the expanded, interconnected, wise self we discussed earlier.
Okay, but I have a highly practical question here. I can see how Just Like Me works for a stranger cutting me off in traffic. But how can a listener effectively use this practice when dealing with a truly toxic, depleting boss or a destructive member of their community without it sliding into enabling?
That's a great question.
If my boss verbally abuses me and I say, well, just like me, he's stressed and afraid, doesn't that empathy just invite further abuse? Does empathy become a trap?
That is a critical distinction that must be made, or the practice becomes dangerous. Empathy is not endorsement. Just Like Me practice is an internal tool designed primarily to protect your energy.
My energy.
Yes. When you dehumanize a toxic boss, when you turn them into a cartoon villain, you actually flood your own nervous system with stress hormones. It drains your genius energy. The practice keeps your heart open and grounded.
Ah, I see.
You can look at a toxic leader and recognize, just like me, this person is suffering and acting out of deep insecurity. You see their fractured humanity. But simultaneously, from that grounded, untriggered place, you use your wise effort to set an ironclad boundary, document the abuse, or quit the job. You are acknowledging their humanity, but you are absolutely not accepting their harm.
So the empathy keeps me from becoming cynical and exhausted, but the boundary keeps me safe. You understand the origin of the fire, but you still put up the firewall.
Precisely. And when you are able to lead your life from that place of grounded empathy and clear boundaries, you become what Yale researcher Emma Seppele calls a positive energizer.
A positive energizer.
Her organizational research shows that the most effective, transformative leaders in any community aren't necessarily the loudest extroverts or the people with the most coercive power. The best leaders are the people who act like the sun. They possess a coherent, values-aligned energy that makes a room glow. They uplift the capacity of everyone around them simply by the way they direct their presence.
That feels like the ultimate, most beautiful goal of wise effort. It's not just about optimizing your own life, it's about becoming a source of renewable energy for yourself and for the entire ecosystem around you.
If we synthesize the vast territory we have covered today, the entire philosophy rests on mastering those three core tasks. First, get curious. Deeply investigate your unique genius energy and brutally audit the traps, the running away, the holding too tightly, the getting stuck in stories that misdirect it into the glass window.
Yeah.
Second, open up. Build the psychological flexibility to let the noisy rooster mind crow without reacting. Sit with the physical discomfort of your feelings to extract their wisdom and expand your rigid sense of self into a connected we.
Right.
And finally, focus your energy. Deliberately deploy this newly aligned force into cultivating positive relationships, honoring the somatic signals of your body, and contributing to your work and community with purpose rather than just pressure.
It is a comprehensive roadmap to stop writing a one-star nightmare review of your own life and start experiencing life at its most lifey. So to our listener, the person sitting there evaluating their own exhausting cycles, you do not have to keep crashing into the same window. The hustle culture narrative that you just need to fly harder is a lie. You have the power to stop, look around the room, and find the open door.
The immense energy required to change your life is already inside you. It has always been there. It is just waiting for the wisdom to guide it.
To wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you step back into your day. The next time you are asked to commit to something, a new project at work, a favor for an acquaintance, or an invitation to a social event, I challenge you to pause for exactly 5 seconds before you open your mouth. Don't let social conditioning answer for you. In those 5 seconds, drop your attention into your body and listen for that whole body yes. If it isn't there, if the only voice you hear is your anxious brain whispering, I probably should do this to be nice, what would happen if you trusted your heart, mind, stood in your values, and just said no? True world-changing genius might just start with the courage of radical refusal.